production-wise, behind the scenes of a Critical Role episode, what goes into like creating that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it is a pretty smooth, kind of running engine now at this point. We've kind of gotten it down pat to where we walk in, we turn on the set, we turn on the cameras, and we roll. So there's it's now at this point where it's pretty, everything's set up, everything's good to go. So it's kind of just a runaway train at this point with anything Critical Role. But on the base side of things, we do have a small, but I would say robust, those are a bit contradictory, but it's true, production team. So we have a technical director that comes in, operates this massive TriCaster that we have. We have, 1 to 2 producers on set normally who make sure that we have everything that we need, that Sam has any props he might need for the ad read, that we have announcement scripts printed out in front of us or on the teleprompter. We have a couple of PAs, same thing, in case we do need a last minute run to the grocery store, probably for something that Sam needs for an ad read. And then, we're kind of turn on the set, turn on the cameras and get rolling. So everything is kind of moving in that way. Obviously leading up to it, there was a ton of trial and error that we figured out in our early days, all the way back at Geek and Sundry. There was a decent amount of problem solving that went in, and kind of like some proprietary dev work that went into building the set that we're currently on. But it's all kind of throwing paint at the wall and seeing what sticks. And at this point, we've got a pretty good system going. That's on the production side of things. Of course, like Matt can kind of speak in terms of if he needs to come in early to build maps, any type of campaign prep that he has to do. That's kind of all of his domain that being a player, I often don't get a peek into, which is always very conflicting, being the creative director, because I like to know everything that's happening on our channel, and that's a very delicate balance that we have struck over the years.
That's where the producers come in, because when there's things that Marisha's involved in, I can work with the producer directly with like any sort of ideas I have for an upcoming set piece that I want to build, that or like if I don't have time to paint a particularly intricate mini in time for what I want to do, I'm preparing every session between every time we play. So a lot of times I'm like coming up with last minute creature encounters or ideas for things I might need the week of, and be like, okay, I don't have time to paint this myself because of all the responsibilities. We have a couple of collaborative, painters that will, if they have time, they can go ahead and help finish something that I started or do something for me in time. That's kind of like a quick rush. Oh God, oh we go. It's always like seat of our pants. But that's the nature of, playing week to week as we do. But the prep for me is just sitting in my office cave and with a Word document open and a couple of Dropbox files where I keep all my world notes organized, and trying to build out as much runway that I feel I can comfortably pull from as we play. I'll outline, if it's a one shot, I'll have an act structure and I'll develop kind of where I want to go. And then I'll build out like a location with a bunch of possible modular things there that might pop up. I'll have a list of NPCs and NPC names in case I got to make shit up on the spot, and just kind of build out a toolbox for that session, and then pray as I arrive and get really anxious before the camera starts. So that's my process.
So, quick question for Marisha then. As a player, are you going in blind to the story and everything like that, pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much. We have just a player's text thread that we have that fires up generally if we have a game where we are about to go into like a battle, like if Matt drops a map at the end of a session and we know like, oh shit, we're going into a fight, then we have a text thread that's just the players where we'll kind of talk strat sometimes, often maybe hours before the game, because we're so busy that we forget to talk strat until we know, oh shit, we're filming today. What are we doing? Oh God, we're in AOR fighting an undead monster. Oh shit. And then we might try and remember what spells that we have, or have a loose game plan. But that's just D&D player battle strat. And that does not mean that we know what we are getting into or have any notion of what Matt has in store for us.
I think to Marisha's frustration sometimes as being the creative director, I'm very particular about keeping everything in the dark. I want everything to be a surprise for the players. I want everything to be authentic for how they react. And they're still my friends. These are still the people that I love playing with. And for me, the real joy of this game is surprising them or catching them off guard or rewarding them for being clever and figuring something out. And so yeah, like Travis constantly teases trying to like trick things out of me here and there, and it's become a non-running gag. But I'm very, very, very much an iron gate when it comes to that sort of stuff. There's a lot of lore things that even Danny, our lore keeper, doesn't know yet because they're secrets I hold until it becomes pertinent down the road for long form plans, maybe.
It's true.
Yeah. Sounds just like a home game, just elevated slightly, to be honest. Elevated as in the effort you're putting in, which could probably happen. I'm sure there are some DMs who are just in a home game and put a lot of effort in. Okay, so this question is, I did a little poll on my channel a few weeks ago asking my audience if they thought a Critical Role was scripted, pretty much. And the three answers were yes, no, or it depends on your definition of scripted. And most people chose it depends on your definition of scripted. Which made me realize that I guess there's more than one definition of scripted. So I was wondering if you guys would think that, not even just Critical Role, but just even a home D&D game, could you think that is scripted in any sense of the word?
Yeah, I honestly think what this debate really comes down to is a matter of semantics, truly. I think the word scripted has gotten conflated. Do we prepare? Yes. Matt just stated that he will spend, hours in his office every week to prepare. Will the players think of strategy or maybe things like, shit, I had this moment with Talison's character and I haven't been able to talk to him about that yet. So next game, if we get a moment, I'm going to try and talk to him. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't. In the nature of any type of improvised long form content, you might have an idea and that moment passes. That, I would say yes, we prepare. But to the point that you've kind of already made, Phil, that's what people do in home games too, or at least I hope that they do. If they're respecting the time that is being put into these games and these campaigns, both, from a dedication standpoint to people making time in their calendars to get together to play, and the dungeon master who is spending even more hours to build this thing for their friends. So yes, I would say scripted, no. Prepared, some plans, sure. I think too, a lot of the debate comes down to this moment was so perfect and it had so much kismet and it was there's no way that couldn't have been scripted, or it was a goal that they were all working towards. No, I think that is just that, age-old adage that is just a little bit of luck, and luck is just preparation and opportunity, so it's once again, I think you will see that with any type of good D&D game where people are invested. That's just playing off of the information that you had, acting as if the character would act, and going with the story.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of it too is trust at the table. I'm to a point. I don't tell the players anything before every session, and a lot of them don't want to know. Even Travis, who teases me, doesn't really want to know because that's part of the spark. The whole reason that we think any of this has gotten the attention that it has over the years is because it is genuine. It is authentic. It isn't plotted out. We don't have bullet pointed narrative beats we're all trying to get to. Like Marisha said, they don't know anything. The most any sort of preset preparation would be if a player came up to me between sessions and be like, hey, I'm thinking about making a magical item kind of like this. Could you help me make it? Or two players maybe being like, hey, my character might have be developing feelings, are you comfortable with pursuing something romantic? You know, things that are more like just checking in with your players and making sure things are comfortable, or that they don't do anything that kind of wrestles, you know, balance out of the DM's plot, you know, in a certain direction. But like, yeah, it's a lot of weight on my shoulders to do all this, but like, it's the way we've always played. It's the way that I love doing it. Yeah. And to Marisha's point, anyone who trusts the people at the table, who knows them well and has developed a rapport that strongly, and they're all kind of at that same level of investment for a game, they'll have moments as magical as the ones that we have at the table.
Yes.
And many people can attest to that and have attested to that through the years.
Yes.
I wonder if a lot of this comes from people that maybe haven't found a group that's on that same level of trust and being, you know, on the same level of being there for each other to make these things happen. Or if that's just not the kind of way they enjoy the game, which is totally fine too. Like, there's so many different ways to engage with tabletop role-playing games. There's so many ways to find what you love. Depending on the way you enjoy these games, whether it be the, you know, kick down door, kill monster, take loot, to being a very theatrical, almost only improvised narrative, minimal dice experience, there's a whole spectrum of ways to engage and enjoy. And each type of gameplay has its own pinnacle of magical moments, whether that be an incredibly tactical battle that leads to an epic finale where the players outsmart this massive villain and use their cool abilities and synchronization to defeat something that they thought was insurmountable. That's awesome. Versus having an incredible emotional, you know, cathartic moment that none of you expected, but you all were there for it. And when it finishes, you're like crying and going, that was incredible. That happens at so many tables out there, but they're all depending on the table and the people that are at them and what you want out of the game. So like, yeah, there are moments in our series that I'm sure seem impossible to have been natural and improvised from some people's experience and perspective in the game. And I totally get that. I don't begrudge them that. But it's not true.
Yeah, and I'll give you this little nugget, Phil, in terms of where I see sometimes people pointing and being like, that's proof. There are a very few and far between moments where, because of production, we know that there is a goal to reach. For example, one of the more recent ones was Robbie's return as Dorian to Critical Role, you know, a handful of episodes ago. The players knew roughly when we were looking at bringing him back, because you have to book and schedule him. At that point in time in the story, Orem, Liam's character, was already messaging him on the sending stone several times. So it's just like, when we're done with this mission, that would be a good time to call Dorian. That's kind of like the most loose things that, once again, I wouldn't even say is scripted. It's just a little bit of planning so that, you know, we can bring our friends back in to the table. But even that, you know, we don't know how. Matt knows all of the ins and outs in terms of like when these people are going to appear. So outside of just being like, make sure you call Dorian, there's not a lot to it. Another kind of example is, say for example, our Mighty Nine live show that we did at the O2 in London. Those live shows, we have a very limited amount of time. So Matt pulled Liam and I aside and said, we're going to start with the two of you at the top of this show. It is your job to, as quickly as you can, rally the troops and get them back together. That's it. So, like, you know, I feel like that could be like the closest that people could look to in terms of things being scripted. But like I said, I would just call that preparation.
Yeah, and it was the Wembley Arena, by the way, not the O2.
Wembley.
Just wanted to clarify.
Sorry, Wembley Arena. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. But yeah, like those are instances where we have to be out by a certain time. Like they will turn the lights off and shut down the production at this hour, and I have a timer on my, you know, table telling me how can I button up this narrative in a way that feels worthwhile for both players and the people that have bought tickets to be there. And so that nudge is like the most I'm willing to give up, because once again, like, my joy is surprising the players. They didn't know that Daniel Sloss was going to jump in with them as a charher. They didn't know what was coming. They didn't know what threats they were dealing with or how it was going to end. Like, it would be smart to do that for a production. It would make things a hell of a lot easier for a lot of people and a hell of a lot easier on me. But that's kind of my albatross to bear, because I am kind of a purist for that game experience. That's what I love the most about DMing for my friends. And I want to try and protect that at all costs, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And also, all those things sound like stuff that can easily happen in a home game as well. If you've got a friend who is going on holiday and you want to invite them out, if you will, for 2 weeks, you would plan that ahead of time, and everyone would know around the table that they were going away for 2 weeks, and that they would be coming back, obviously. And time limits are always a thing in games. If I know I've only got everyone for 3 hours, I'm gonna, that was very in depth. And I know I've only got you for another 10 minutes, so
that's okay. We're flexible. We can stay a little later too.
See where we can get to. So we covered, if you believe there's a big difference between a home game and like an actual play broadcasted online, and the answer was kind of like it's more, you've got to be more prepared for an actual play. But I presume, and obviously actual plays are still a very new thing in the grand scheme of things, and there might be different actual plays out there that do different things, but I presume your overall answer there was kind of like you've just got to be on it more. Obviously there's more at stake, but I mean, actual plays will vary in how they do things as well. I've guested and been parts of actual plays that do have some pre-planning, that are like, here's where we're starting and here's where we got to get by the end of the episode, and these are the scenes we're going to do, and improvise in between the lines, if you will. And that's fine for those productions, but like, this is still our game. This is still our home game. The way we've always run things is trusting the players, the performers. And that's the other thing too. We're all professional actors. Like, all of us our main careers for years before we even started playing together was being immersed in our imagination and following those instincts as performers and living within a character that's not us, and seeing where the logic of that character will take us within, stories that are presented to us. And through these games, we're able to create that whole cloth in the moment. And it's been magical for me since high school, but now it's been magical to watch all my friends realize how incredible these experiences can be. And then somehow we made this company out of it accidentally. So every actual play has its own way of doing it and their own like control state and such. And there's no shade to any of that. That's how people do production. We started as a home game, and we love it for being that experience and trusting in that. And I don't think how we could do it any other way, really. You put so much work into this. How does it feel when someone just comes up and accuses your stuff of being fake, really scripted? Like,
honestly, over the years, we take it as a compliment. Because we know the truth, we know the reality, and it's hard not to feel a little excited and kind of thrilled that it's apparently good enough and compelling enough that people think there's no way it can be real. So you're like, okay, thanks. There's like a small facet of frustration, because it's like, if only because those narratives end up being perpetuated, and often from folks that might be less interested to want to engage with our stories if they think it is scripted. And it's like, but it's not. But that's really the only instance in where it's a negative feeling, other than like, no, it's why are you perpetuating this myth? I understand if you don't, if you don't have experiences that make you believe that, but that's where the frustration comes from. But like, we're not offended, to Marisha's point. It's every time it comes up, it is more than anything just a huge compliment, and I think it speaks volumes to the talent and ability of all the players at that table. And you.
And I sure.
That is such a good answer. That I wasn't expecting, but yeah, that's so true, and it's a great way to look at it. It's because that's where I think a lot of it comes from. There is a little bit of like, it's so good it can't be real. You know, that's where I see a lot of that. It must be scripted because they're all so on point there. But it was interesting you saying that you're all professional actors though, because I've seen that a lot. I've seen like, oh, they're all professional actors, don't expect that at your table. And I've always thought, I was like, what does that, how does being a professional actor kind of add, I guess you're just used to performing in front of a camera kind of thing. Like, how does being a professional actor help you in an actual play?
I think being a professional actor is just more or less a shortcut to getting to that sort of investment in a story. Any table can get to that level over time with practice and comfort and trust. You know, that what we eventually get to with our games, you know, that people are commenting on in this context isn't that rare when tables have spent that time together and have established that sort of trust and that buy-in to the world and these characters. But because we're professional actors, we've been training, we've been kind of preparing to do this unknowingly for a lot of time. And so we already have the skills at the ready, as well as that you know, being able to listen to other people in the scene and have an instinctual feeling as to what feels like the right time to come in, what's the right time to button and finish the scene, what's the right time to engage somebody else. Those just come with experience in scene work and narrative. So I don't think it's not something that nobody can attain. Anybody can attain that. And we're not some incredibly, you know, ridiculous level that nobody could achieve. It's just that we have the shortcuts to get there easier and sooner. Because of our life and professional experience. But I don't think it's exclusionary. I don't think other people can't do this either.
Yeah, I think I mean, I'll be so bold to say like that they're professional actors, so don't expect this from your home game. It's kind of a disservice, and I think can honestly be kind of invalidating to what people can achieve in their home games. You know, we've been to countless amount of conventions where we meet and interact with the fans and hear so many stories about people who had these incredibly compelling moments in their games and their character died and they were bawling on the kitchen floor. And that's because that's just, you know, when you invest yourself and you invest that time into this kind of collective art piece that you're doing with your friends, of course it's going to be emotional and you're going to have feelings. You don't have to be able to deliver, you know, a Shakespearean monologue, you know, and a classical and a modern in order to achieve that. It's just really about, like, you know, these role-playing games are always kind of a device to put a little bit of yourself into these characters that we're all playing. And I don't mean we as in Critical Role, I mean like collectively everyone who plays tabletop RPGs. So I think it can be a really powerful tool to have these beautiful moments. So I never want that sentiment to dissuade people from playing, or at least like trying it and going for it and kind of giving a bit of that vulnerability at the table. Because to Matt's point, if you do have a group that you can trust, and that's obviously a pretty big prerequisite here, and we encourage anyone that we talk to who wants to do this to like talk beforehand, talk about what you do want to kind of experience, and make sure that everyone is on the same page, you know, and get through all of the lines and veils on things that you're willing to go into and things that you're not. And then once you get there, you know, I think people will be surprised just really how compelling and moving the stories around your home game can be. So I don't want people to use that like, well, they're actors, so don't expect this, as a way to write off that it can happen and that you can have those moments, because I think that's unfair to everyone who plays tabletop RPGs.
I'd like to change the phrase from they're professional actors, so don't expect this immediately. You know what I mean? That's what I mean by a shortcut. We started streaming when we already were good friends for a long time and playing for a long time together. We already had that trust on top of having those skill sets already honed. But any table can get there. They just might not start there. And to Marisha's point, it's about expectations too. It's about being very open and communicative about what your expectations are for the game.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering that. Yeah, I often think as well as just a level of like D&D, like TTRPGs in general, are in a weird space where it was, or at least it used to be seen as something happening in someone's basement somewhere, and but in a room with a lot of introverted people. And then, but role-playing is actually quite extroverted in a way.
Yeah.
So if you have a table full of kind of extroverts and theatre kids and stuff, that's going to play so differently to a table full of introverted people, just naturally. But over time, it's certainly what happened with me, because I was so introverted, and DMing really brought that side out of me, only at the table, only coming to the table, of putting on like a bigger persona and really putting on some gusto. And I know I find it incredibly helpful in that sense.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, completely. It's the whole reason I became an actor was because I learned to DM. Like, I had no interest in theater, but as I began playing D&D at the beginning of high school, it was through that experience of creating and embodying these NPCs and trying to write stories for my friends and get them invested in it that I began to find a love of performing. And I'm still kind of introverted to a certain degree, but like, it's through role-playing games that I've learned to come out of my shell a little bit, but also give myself permission to say it's okay to be introverted. And sometimes I don't want to go out and be social. Sometimes I want to play games with friends that are more tactical, combat based, and aren't so narrative, forward, and being able to allow myself that permission as well. Like, all these things can exist.
Perfect. And very quickly, you guys have pretty much answered this as well, but if there's any final thoughts on it, just where do you guys think that the idea that Critical Role is scripted comes from? What do you think the source of that is?
It can come from a lot of places. I think a lot of it can be people who see what we do and compare it to their games, and like as a GM, and feel like it somehow diminishes the perspective of what they provide, which I think is both untrue and unfair, because I can guarantee you there are things that they do with their game that I don't do anywhere near as well too. Yeah, I have a toolbox of silly voices that I trained on for many years, and I have some things I do well in world building, but there are other GMs out there that do combat and tactical, monster building better than I do. There are people out there that have a better idea of setting atmosphere and mood, and people have to do better pacing when it comes to narrative. Everyone has specialties and things they're really good at, and we all try and learn from each other. But I think some people who don't, who either have an insecurity preset or it triggers an insecurity, use this to make them feel more comfortable, which is, I totally get, and that's totally viable. And I don't want to try and slap that out of your hand either. Like, the whole reason we started streaming this, one of the main things that drove me to want to do this was because I wanted to make people less afraid to play. I had the experience growing up of so many people asking me at like parties or at events when I mentioned I play D&D, being like, how does that even work? I've always been interested, but I don't know how. And then trying to explain it wasn't enough. You hand someone a book and a couple character sheets, and it's like, oh, I already graduated college, I'm good. And it's like, it was such a difficult thing to convey to people. And so part of the purpose of streaming for us was to show people that, no, it can be fun slapdickery. It can be emotionally arresting. It can be a really fun game where you're trying to beat a challenge as a team. And here's examples of it. It's much easier to send a link on YouTube than it is for me to sit there at a party with a drink in my hand being like, okay, so you roll your strength and your dexterity and your constitution stats, but like those are your physical stats versus your mental stats, but they inform your saving throws. You also have skills involved that may or may not build your, you know what, never mind, I'm just going to leave. It's much easier to just send a link on YouTube. Yeah. So I think that's probably one source of it. And I think a lot of it is perpetuated by detractors, people that just don't like us, which is viable too. Not everyone's going to like you. Trust me, as a person who is obsessed with making everyone happy and make sure everyone likes me, the internet is a dangerous place. People pleaser, it's bad. But yeah, people out there, just some people won't like you or won't like what you do, and you'll find communities of other people that don't, and that's a great place to perpetuate this frustration. And you know what? Power to you if that helps you find community, I guess. It doesn't. I've learned to be better with that over time, and not have it affect me as much as it once did. But yeah, I mean, there are multitudes of reasons why. I understand some, and others I wish I could understand. But all that I know is what is true and what we do and what we enjoy. And I'm not going to go out there and make a point of being like, you were wrong. I'll be like, I know the truth, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think getting comfortable with, knowing our truth and our intentions, and like you said, we're not going to bust down people's doors and be like, believe me, it is what it is. There's plenty of clips out there from where we were taking cell phone footage of us at our home games, so you can see not a lot has changed. Even I'll share this one little anecdote. My brain, you guys, I'm sorry. This one anecdote that maybe will be an antidote to this notion. Matt and I had just started dating, or were early into dating, and he had a long-running D&D game that he was running for several years. And it was a group of people that was kind of a mix between some actors and some not. One of the people in this game was Luis Carrazzo, incredible actor who has been on our channel. Love him to death. And like I said, I didn't even know who Ashley Johnson was at this point. So this was so far beyond Critical Role was even thought of. And Matt was like, hey, I'm having a D&D game. Do you want to just I have people over. Do you want to just come and watch? And I was like, yeah, okay. And I played a couple times. So I was like, yeah, I'll be a fly on the wall. That sounds fun. And in this night of D&D, it ended up being this crazy pivotal character moment for Luis, where his character had this, Matt, you can probably explain this better. He was like a twin soul type of a person. So his soul was split into another person who was like his sister, his twin sister. And they basically he thought she was long dead, but she started kind of speaking to him from beyond. And it was this emotional moment, and he's burst into tears and was crying, and everyone was emotional, and it was just in our living room, and I thought I was gonna be watching a fun, happy-go-lucky game of D&D, and I didn't know that could happen. I didn't know that any of that could happen with the cursory knowledge of D&D that I had at the time, and it was mind-boggling. I was riveted, and it was wild to watch. And like I said, this was years before we ever turned a camera or even thought about turning a camera onto any type of games. And it was just their long-running game that they had at home. So that was one of my first big introductions that D&D could be that. It's crazy.
Yeah, amazing. So yeah, sounds like you've always ran these incredibly narrative, emotional, story-driven games.
Those have been the stories that excite me, but also they just kind of naturally happen. And in that campaign, longtime friend Sean Manzano, who just works in game development, he's in no way, shape, or form an actor or performer, had some of the most raw and deep and emotionally driven moments as this extremely intense, stoic kind of aged ranger character that had to drag a party member out from the rest of them being eaten by ghouls and saying, if we don't run, all of us die. And anybody with time and trust can get to that if everyone wants to go to that type of in-depth storytelling. And I think that's kind of the overall goal of what we were trying to do with Critical Role, is give people that permission. And some people aren't comfortable with that or don't like that, and that's okay. And that's kind of a big theme we've been trying to make sure people understand. We never expected to be this banner show for as long as we have, and there's a lot of unasked for responsibility heaped on that as part of the journey, and a lot of unearned shit that gets thrown at us for it in the same space, but that just kind of comes with the territory. And through it all, we're trying to do our best out there to be a beacon of light for a lot of people, and an invitation for others to come and play and have a good time. And detractors or not, we're having a good time, and we're doing it honestly.
Yeah, and just kind of following up on that, I think, to Matt's point, one of the goals with Critical Role was maybe this will inspire other people to experience how incredible tabletop RPGs can be. So I think the most frustrating part of any of these sentiments is anything that leads to the opposite effect. What we absolutely don't want is for people to look at our show and go well, that's unattainable and unachievable for anyone outside of professional actors, so not even going to try. That's heartbreaking. And I deeply, deeply hope that if anything can come out of this conversation with you and here on bonus action, that the opposite, that maybe we can kind of squash a little bit of that, because that is quite literally the opposite goal that we wanted to achieve. An analogy that I've seen thrown out before is like, it would be if any young athlete watched a professional basketball game, watch like the WNBA or like the NBA, and said like, well, I can never be that, so I won't play basketball for fun. Like, no, go play, have fun. It's a great game. Enjoy it, and just enjoy yourself, and enjoy the journey that it takes you on. Yeah. So I hope if anything.
And occasionally a game of basketball with your friends will have some moments as cool as anything on that court might have been.
Yes.
Nothing gets my hair on the back of my neck standing up quite like the phrase the Matt Mercer effect, which was something that, to Marisha's point, the antithesis of the intent of this. But there is a spectrum of people in this world, and some people come in with unfair expectations. And if I'm going to be the poster child to place blame on for that, I'll bear that albatross, as long as people also acknowledge that, the pressure of you to perform as a GM on all of your GM duties is only as much as you and your players have discussed what those expectations should be. If a player comes to the table freshly and expects, something on the level of what we've honed over now, 13 years playing together, then that's on you for being an asshole and expecting too much from people out of the gate. If a GM is holding themselves to too high of a standard by comparison, I'm so sorry. And please don't, because the journey to get to anywhere near what we're capable of is your own to make. And one day you'll be so much better than I am at other things or the same things. You can go to any table at a game convention and find so many variations to how people run games, and they're all correct. It's just finding what combination of these different focuses work best for how you want to tell stories with the people at that table and your friends, and use that comparison as aspirational as opposed to something that detracts your ability. That's what I hope. That's sincerely what I want.
That's all for my questions. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. This has been great. Thanks for taking the time.